Welcome.
Thanks, John. So it's a smaller world. It's a flatter world. Can we really say yet it's a smarter world? Right? That's what it's all going to come down to. So that's what I want to talk about today. All right. You know, you can't listen to the political news this week. You can't look at the job reports that are coming out every day to get some sense that we're at what we call an inflection point. It's an overused term. It's a very precise mathematical term. You know? So what it means is you're going up a certain way, and well, what do? Just slide back down? Or do you keep going? You know, do you keep rising? Do you move on to something else? I think everyone agrees that we're at such an inflection point. I think everybody agrees that there are some really big things that have to happen. There have to be some major transformations. These transformations aren't just going to happen in Washington. They're not just going to happen in London, capitals around the world. They've got to happen in the IT industry as well. Moreover, it's going to have to be a partnership. So we've got to put together these pieces, and I'm going to show you some of the odds and ends, the different pieces. And indeed, I want you to think back about everything you've heard over the last couple of days. I will tell you I'm not going to be totally original about all these things because it's common technology that we all have to talk about. But while the pieces may be small and while the pieces may be somewhat disconnected, the bets we've got to place on what we do with them are indeed very large. And we've got to add some more smarts, some more intelligence into the system itself. So we've got this huge, huge buildup of computing power, right? The communication infrastructure. But it's not working perfectly yet, right? As Tim mentioned a couple of days ago, we have the instrumentation. And I like to think of this as my fingertips, right? The nerves at the tips of my fingers. We've got the interconnectivity. I like to think of that in terms of the nerves that are connecting the different parts of my body. And we've got this huge processing power. All right, my brain. Is everything firing? Is everything working? Is everything solving the problems that we need to solve? All right? Well, what's the good news? Well, in terms of the instrumentation, in terms of the RFID tags, we had in 2007, last time people really counted, about 2 billion RFID tags. In 3 years, we think we might get up to about 30 billion tags produced globally. All right? What about connectivity? Obviously, a lot of people, everybody's here connected in multiple ways, right? By 2011, 1 trillion connected devices, right? Really, some of them very small, of course, and 2 billion people on the web, right? In 2001, there were 60 million transistors, right? Ancient history, 7 years ago. 60 million transistors for every human on the planet. In 2 years, 2010, there will be 1 billion transistors for every human on the planet. By the way, in case you're wondering, that's not a piece of modern art. That's the original transistor back in 1947. We've come a ways. All right? In terms of speed, this year, first time I will note, I've mentioned IBM, will maybe be the last time. Our Roadrunner supercomputer broke what's called a petaflop barrier. That's 1,000 trillion calculations per second, as you can see on the bottom there. That's 1 with 15 zeros after it. That's a lot of processing power. You know, what's it doing? Is it just running there, right? This one happens to be at Los Alamos. But what do we do with all of this? Right? We've been building all this stuff out. And yes, we have social networks, and we do a lot of good things. We're connecting people in new ways. But the amount of connectivity we have, the amount of instrumentation, the amount of processing power we have far, far exceeds, if you will, the good, the smart things we're actually doing with these things. Are we putting it to good use to solve the world's problems? All right. What about risk? It's not just home mortgages. It's insurance, investments, all right? There's a big difference between spreading the risk around, right, which seemed like a clever idea by some, right, and actually understanding that risk, tracking that risk, and the big word, managing the risk. What about power? Is every watt that's produced somehow get across a grid and used really well? Of course not. We are losing some estimates. Well more than 50% of all the power that's generated is lost before it ever gets to any device that might be doing something. That translates to 381 kilowatt hours lost per person per year around the world. What about traffic? Now here, I really like that bus, and I want to know what the decision was of that bus to pull into that intersection, right? In New York City, on some blocks, 45% of the traffic are just people going around the block trying to find a place to park. Congested roadways in the United States cost $78 billion annually, right? And it's not just gasoline, 2.9 billion gallons of wasted gas, but productivity, right? That's very important that we measure that as well. Supply chains, they're not exactly humming along working perfectly. $40 billion lost annually in the US due to inefficient supply chains. Okay, so we've got the instrumentation, we've got the connectivity, we've got the brain power, right, in the computers, right? We've got this huge convergence now that's going on between the traditional infrastructure, the concrete infrastructure, and now the IT infrastructure. So it's nice to have convergence, but it's nice to get to the convergent point, right? And what does that mean? Okay, all right. It means that moving from full of potential, right? You never want to tell a teenager that he or she is just full of potential. How scary, right? But you got to move to something, right, where you're actually doing something. And here we're going to refer to it as being intelligent. It's one thing to have a computer, but is there intelligence? I'm not giving you an AI talk here, right? Do we work to actually put all this power together to improve our lives? Yes, in fact, drive business growth, right? But at the same time, and critically important, protecting the rights and freedoms of people. Stockholm, what are they doing with traffic? They're trying to control it. Massive congestion downtown Stockholm. We worked with them to put in place a system. It reduced traffic 22%, depending on the time of the day, dropped emissions 12 to 40%, increased daily users of public transportation by 40,000. Isn't that a problem? You've got 40,000 more people who want to use public transportation. They had to redo the schedules because the buses could actually get between stops faster because there were fewer cars. What a terrible problem to have. We're also working in London. This week was announced Singapore as well. I'm sorry for the vegetarians in the audience for this slide. Let me just tell you. Lots of things people talk about preventing, for example, mad cow disease, use of RFID from the beginning to the end of the food chain. This is one very recent example where we've been working in Germany with Metro AG to keep track of the meat that's in supermarkets so that they know when it is going bad. This is obviously related to healthcare, right? Different ways. We've got complicated systems, right, that mix and match and get combined. All right? Rivers, Hudson River in New York, my state, 315 miles long, goes from the Adirondack Mountains all the way down to New York City into the Atlantic Ocean. We've now worked with the Beacon Institute for Rivers and Estuaries on a system that, with sensors that will tell us essentially the health of the river along that. Why is that important? It's not just nice to know. There are industries along the river, right? When is the best time to use that water in the river? It's not when there's migrating fish going up the river, for example. Different types of concerns. Okay, finally, as an example, solar. We've heard some about this. This is a problem that has to be attacked from many different directions. Here are three that we're working on. All right, first is solar magnification, right? Put a magnifying glass on that solar cell. You drive more energy out of the thing. Unfortunately, you also tend to melt it. Right? How do you fix that problem? All right? Solar cells, typically made out of silicon. New technologies that we've worked on, indeed many other people. SIGs technology, now let's see if I get this right. Copper, indium, gallium, selenide, okay, technology, 100 times thinner. So much thinner that you can almost imagine it being painted on, for example, the back of your laptop, the top of your laptop when you're outside and doing something like this. And recycling silicon. When chips are manufactured and they go wrong, right, how can they be scraped essentially and reused? So I want to leave you with 5 ideas here, all right? This is a time where the world is ready for and needs big bets, not little tiny projects. But that means big partnerships, public-private partnerships, like we haven't really seen in a long time, but it's what's going to start pulling us out of this. Second one, it's a good time politically. I personally think they're going to be rather conducive to such ideas, particularly as you look at their agendas and who they're now putting in place in the administration to help. We need new types of leaders who can collaborate and cooperate globally and across many different disciplines. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any business schools who actually teach what we need, right, from those leaders, of the people that we, and I think many other companies, want to employ. You've got to deal with privacy and security concerns at the same time. It's not an afterthought, all right? And I do open source, I do standards. It's nice to hear the sort of apologies for why people aren't really using standards, right? If you're going to tackle problems like this, with this level of complexity, with this need for interoperability, you are not going to do it without open standards. Finally, I want to end with a quote. You know, IBM's pretty big. You know, we've been a startup now for 97 years. We were in stealth mode for about 20 years before then. We've got 386,000 employees around the world. Every one of them got this letter yesterday from Sam Palmisano. This is a little part of it. So as we think about this notion of putting all our efforts together and focusing this big corporation, almost $100 billion worth of revenue, on what we're going to be doing for the next few years, this notion of a smarter planet, as Sam said, is a way of encapsulating and conveying how IBMers think, their dedication to the progress, and our grounding in our core values. So I hope that tells you a little bit more about IBM. Thank you.